When it comes to both Black Swan and Supergiant, I do not recommend both of them. Now, I actually think they're decent cards, both of them. I just think they have low build variety. Supergiant having a little bit more, and they're not a core card in any build. I think you can run most builds without either Black Swan or Supergiant, and you're definitely going to be fine. I do think there are potential for both of these cards to have their own unique decks in the future, but just looking at the data, looking at it right now, they're not really cards I would say are core or necessary for your collection for you to do well. So that's my take. Let's get into it. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Educate Colonel Snap channel. Today we're going to be talking about both Black Swan and Supergiant today. I think that's probably something good to go for during the first week. We'll just cover both cards, maybe take a little bit more time to review them, but yeah, that's our idea. We're going to be going through them, what I think about them, and whether you should pick them up for your collection. Yeah, I mean, you already know, you saw the intro, but yeah, let's get started. So today we're going over both Black Swan and Supergiant, this time since they were both released at the same time. So Black Swan is a 3 energy 5 power on reveal. Until the end of your next turn, your 1 cards cost 0. And then Supergiant is a 4 power, 4 energy 5 power. The next turn, nothing reveals until the end of the game. So those are the 2 cards. We're going to start with Black Swan first, since it's a season pass card. It's pretty unique. It has a 3/5 stat line. A lot of people were saying that 3/5s usually have a downside. I don't know if that's necessarily true. They have deck constraints, and that you have to play them in decks that aren't super flexible, right? Like even Wave, you need big cards. Lady Civ, you need to discard, things like that, right? So this one, you need to be running 1 cost cards. Definitely has synergies with things like Bishop, things like Hid Monkey, I guess Werewolf by Night also, right? Where you can just play 1 cost cards for cheap. Also, if you're playing 1 cost cards, you want to be playing things like Beast and Falcon, since you can put them back to your hand, double dip in that effect. So overall, it is a pretty interesting card. It is a little bit restrictive in in the type of decks you can play. When it comes to this card, overall, I don't fully recommend it, just because it's a card that has small deck variety. I would say it's the main issue, and it's not like dominating the meta or anything like that. I do think it's pretty good in the decks that it can be played in, right? So those are usually Thanos or Bounce Shells, but you do have to be playing 1-drops. I'm not the biggest fan of I'm not the biggest fan of 1-drops in particular, to be fair. Like a lot of my decks don't run 1s in essence, just because I feel like you could do other things. But here you do have to run some 1s to make sense. And in those decks, I wouldn't say Black Swan is like a core card. Like you could definitely run a Thanos deck without Black Swan. You could definitely run a Hid Monkey Bishop deck without Black Swan. You'll do fine. I do think it is better in the Hid Monkey versions, but it is a card that isn't necessarily, oh my god, I need this to build the deck, where things like Zabu and stuff like that is you do need Zabu to build the deck. So that's kind of where it's at for me. It's not a bad card, so if you do want to play it, if you do want to try it out, you can, but it just has that like I'm playing with 1-drops problem for me, where you could have just played a different deck that doesn't have to rely on 1-drops. Like it has Killmonger issues, right? Things like that. And if you want to run Kyra, I feel like you're losing the plot of playing a deck like this. And usually, if you're like the issues, like if you get Killmongered on 3, that's unfortunate because you're playing the Black Swan. Though a lot of times you're playing Black Swan on 5. I do think Black Swan into Falcon, Black Swan into Beast is pretty good. Like that's actually pretty satisfying. But generally, in a lot of games, right, you might not get that setup. So that's kind of the issue there. Now, once we go with Supergiant's a little bit different of a card. I initially was not I was not sold on this card at all. I thought it would be like by far the worst card released this month. That's my thought. That was my initial thoughts. I'm definitely wrong about that. It has definitely more synergies than I thought. It's good with Elias. I think that's obvious. Lockdown. But there's also other things you can use it as. It's just a tech tool in essence, right? There are some cards on 5. This shuts down. Jane Foster shuts down. Leech, it shuts down. Galactus, honestly, it shuts down in a lot of cases. And there's other synergies you can use. Taskmaster being pretty cool that I see quite a bit. Things like that. So I will say it is definitely better than I thought, right? Being able to play next turn not reveals, it has more uses than just Eliath gameplay and maybe Hella gameplay, which was my initial impression. Now, that being said, I still also don't recommend this card. Now, it's a little bit weird, right? Because I've been praising it, but it still has some of its old problems in that it, like, using it well kind of plays like a combo card, which I'm not a big fan of combo cards generally, unless they're, combo super broken, just because I've seen time and time again that combo decks, like, aren't the most consistent decks to play, right? Like, if you're playing, like, Phoenix Force, stuff like that, like, the payoff is high, but getting all the pieces consistently game after game is not that likely, and you'll struggle. And once again, it's also not a core card in the archetypes. It's kind of slotting into archetypes already existing, so it doesn't necessarily make a new deck. I do think this does have the potential to make new decks. Its synergy with Taskmaster is pretty unique in essence, so there's definitely some deck build ideas. I could definitely recommend this card more than I recommend Black Swan, but it's still in the, like, do I have to get this? If you're looking progression, you probably are fine skipping. And just getting priority with this is hard. So if you're trying to play with Eliath, you're playing a 4/5. Maybe you're playing a 3/5. So if you're playing with Zabu, you can maybe make it a 3/5 or so, and that's not that bad. But it's still underrated regardless. So just getting priority if your opponent knows what you're doing, or your opponent has like a deck that can get priority, it's very easy to do that here. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, I will say Eliath is still a toxic card, and Supergiant has definitely increased the amount of Eliaths that are being played. So, like, you got to keep that in mind when you're playing. Like, hey, can I get Eliath here? Oh, they played Supergiant. I got to start thinking about Eliath. Things like that. But I do also, like, for some of its good things, right? It's a tech answer, right? For a decent amount of archetypes, it's definitely more unique in terms of what it answers, and I do like that. Like, new tech cards that counter different things, right? It's not all Shang-Chi counter, Enchantress counter, like you just kill things or turn them off. This is like a different way of countering particular cards, and it counters more unique cards than generally like an Enchantress or Echo or things like that. So I kind of like that, just giving players more ways to deal with cards they deem problematic. And then generally this also has just more build variety than I expected. So I thought you would look at this, you'd see a 4/5 and be like, ooh, I can't play this in a lot of decks. But I think you can kind of get some of the power back by some of the combos people have been trying. So I actually think, even though it's still in the do not recommend category, it's recommended higher than Black Swan. And I could definitely see a world where this is a core card in a particular archetype. It's just that doesn't exist right now. So maybe with some of the new cards being added, you might find something unique. But that's my current thoughts on those two cards. Kind of a shame, but you do have to be pretty rigorous with what you're spending your spotlights on. So that's just my current thoughts at the moment. Now let's go into some of the deck variety, the build variety that people have seen, and also the spotlights, as we generally do. So here we do have the spotlights here for Supergiant. Once again, if you are missing Dorkhog Zabu, I still think that is pretty good. Zabu is like one of the best Series 4s in the game. So if you just need to get that, like, I think that's perfectly fine to pick up. Same thing with Darkhawk. Like, that's perfectly fine to pick up. Super Giant honestly is good. Is like maybe I would raise this to C. Like maybe, but I haven't touched it here. But that's maybe something. But yeah, generally it's better than I thought it'd be. So that's nice. Now let's look at some of the deck builds. First build we do have is running both cards. Just kind of the traditional Thanos works with all the new cards kind of thing. So here, you got Black Swan for the stones, and then you have Super Giant just to play it out. It's something they can play into a lockjaw, pulls out something big, also kind of protects your plans. Like they don't exactly know where you're playing everything. So generally, I think it's fine. You don't need either of them. Right, Thanos shells have been in the game forever, so you really don't need either of them, but it's something you can do, and it's just kind of showcasing what's there. Next up, we have another Black Swan version. This one's a different type of Thanos list. This one's a little bit more focused on the one drops. You add an extra one drop in there, but you are playing Khazar, you are playing Blue Marvel, you are playing Valkyrie, that kind of thing. So you do take advantage of more of the one drops in this type of deck. So that's definitely another way of playing Black Swan that you can do. And then here is something I gravitate towards when I look at Black Swan, just a bounce shell. I think it's pretty good. A lot of people are playing Werewolf. I don't particularly love Werewolf, honestly. I feel like it's not needed, but a lot of people do like Werewolf, so you can definitely play Werewolf. I have Shang-Chi instead. And here, you're kind of just relying on scaling through some of your one drops. I don't see people playing Hawkeye. I think it's actually fine, right? If you can Hawkeye into, you can get like a 1/7, which is I think pretty good. So that's something valuable. And then Bishop is like OP in a deck like this. Like Bishop is just like crazy good. Like as long as you play on 3 or 4, like that thing is like 10 power a lot of games. So I think that's a really strong combo. And then Hidden Monkey is same thing. So just kind of the general. This is where I think of Black Swan when I think of Black Swan decks. So definitely something you can try out. And then this one is a pretty unique take on Black Swan. You're playing Dracula Dump, but now you have Black Swan on 5 to kind of get rid of these, like all the ones in your hand, right? Because usually when you play Dracula Dump, sometimes you can't get rid of the ones. Here with the Black Swan, you can, right? So you can just play it out normally. You're playing, I don't know, Strong Guy on 3, Dracula on 4, Black Swan on 5, and then you dump your hand on 6, right? You're either playing Destroyer in all your ones, or you're playing, I don't know, Infinite. I don't know if you're ever playing Infinite. You're just playing Destroyer in your ones, right? Or you're playing your Cosmo, your Tech Cosmo to counter their top deck. Yeah, I mean that's an idea for sure. But Cosmo also just fits into the Destroyer package anyway. So yeah, so I thought this was a unique take on Black Swan, something that takes advantage of her ability and also just the general good base power of the card. So yeah, it makes sense to me. Now moving on to Super Giant. I would say this is like generally where you're going to see most Super Giants, just in an Alliant lockdown shell. I thought it would be difficult to get priority, but thanks to Miss Marvel and one drops, as long as you get Zabo on 2, it's doable to get priority, right? So you'll go like Nebula, Zabu, Miss Marvel, and then you play Super Giant in one of the other lanes, right? And you'll have you get a lot of power that way. So that's kind of how people have been getting Super Giant to actually work with priority. You kind of need Miss Marvel. But other than that, like it's generally a lockdown shell. And do you need Super Giant here? I don't think so. Like that's my takeaway why I don't recommend it. Like I feel like you could just play this without Super Giant and you're perfectly fine. Like you could just play a different 4 and you would be fine. So maybe this is just, it feels like people have just been reminded how annoying Goliath is and not like, oh, you need Super Giant to make this work. That's my takeaway here. And there are some unique applications for Super Giant. This one replaces Leech in the She-Hulk Infinite deck. So, and you also you get to add Alliance because you're scum like that. But generally, Leech is usually put on 5, and then you remove all of their 6 costs, right, so that they can't take off your Limbo, things like that. Super Giant you play on 5 as well. Benefit over Leech is, once again, it's a 4/5 instead of a 5/3, and then it's 1 cost less, so you actually get to trigger your Sunspot, your Cyclops, your Misty Knight, all of those type of cards. So you get that benefit, so it ends up being a little bit better than a 4/5, like sometimes like a 4/7, a 4/8. So that's not bad. So that's the idea there, and then you still get to, you can do something like She-Hulk Goliath if you're not going to She-Hulk Hulk or She-Hulk Infinite. So there's that also final turn that gives you that option as well. So that's kind of the take here. I think it's cool. You don't need this, right? Once again, you could just play Leech. So it's not like it's not like it's a core card in this deck, but it's a cool idea that seems to work. So that's the type of unique things I didn't really think about when I was reviewing the card before. The next up, same thing here. This one's a little bit different. You are playing Loki with Alliance, but the Super Giant is just like, since you're playing Zabu, you can get Super Giant out early, and Loki is also very good at getting priority. So that's the kind of main takeaway here. Loki gets you priority so that the Super Giant to Alliance shell can actually work. So that's the strategy for this particular one. Something cool to see. And I think those are all the decks I have here. So yeah, overall, like, I'm more skewed towards Super Giant being something you should get versus Black Swan. But I would say both of them are not core in a lot of decks. You don't need them. You can definitely get away with not having either of them in your connection currently. I wouldn't be super surprised to see Super Giant have a unique build. Black Swan having a unique build, that'd be more surprised. Well, I mean, it is a unique card, so maybe there's definitely something that you need all that 1 cost discounts to make work. Things like the Dracula dump is kind of unique take there, things like that. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Something I've realized is I'm not covering the bundles. I need to figure out how to do that better. So that's for me, but I'll figure it out. But yeah, anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you're doing well. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Like, I'm reading the mental script of anyways.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow, snap. Your skills will be